I'm Pip, and welcome to the Midwife Pip podcast, the home of expert information and real chats on all things pregnancy, birth, and beyond. Today's guests are first-time parents whose birth experience wasn't something that they had to just get through.
We found that people either had just the most perfect, amazing experience ever, or the absolute worst, horrific experience ever. So you just hear extremes.
It was something that they felt empowered by, grounded in, and even really positive.
We would not have necessarily coped with all of that happening very well if we hadn't known how to cope with it. And I think what we've seen with a few of our friends is maybe they haven't found it as easy.
Is it luck? Is it preparation? Is it mindset? Is it support? Or something deeper that more families deserve to understand before they step into that room? In this episode, we're going to unpack their story, their expectations and reality, and the moments that changed everything for them. Because a positive birth is not about perfection. It's about ownership, about trust, and about discovering strength that you didn't know you had. If you're pregnant, planning, or just curious about a different kind of birth story, this conversation might change the way you think about it entirely. This week, I'm joined by the wonderful Kelly and Joe and baby Lola. They are incredible first-time parents who I have had the absolute honour of supporting through my YPJ, Your Pregnancy Journey programme. So let's get into it. And you are going to hear lots from baby Lola on this episode too. So bear with us as we navigate the realities of podcasting with a baby. Welcome, guys. And thanks so much for joining me because you're doing the juggle, aren't you?
No, thanks for having us on. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, definitely. Really exciting to talk to you.
Oh, so excited. You guys have smashed it from the very beginning, actually. You have been such an impeccable team. So before going into labour, guys, I want to take you back to the beginning. What were some of your biggest kind of expectations or fears about giving birth when you were taking yourselves all the way back to being pregnant? And where do you think some of those perhaps kind of came from for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think I've always had a bit of a fear around giving birth, going into labour, and looking back on it now, it was definitely from a place of just not knowing enough about it at all. And you know, you just see how it's portrayed on TV and films, and you hear people telling you their experiences, and we found that people either had just the most perfect, amazing experience ever, or the absolute worst, horrific experience ever. So you just hear extremes, and it's just, you know, it's not informed, and it's not, you don't have the full picture. So I think I was just picking all of that up, you know, along the way. I think as well, my mum had a difficult experience with me, and so I think there might have been a little bit of possible, you know, fear passed on there potentially. But really, I think it was just it was completely. It was that thing of I hadn't really properly engaged with it to try and understand why I had those fears until I joined your program. And I remember that first call we had where we were finding out a little bit about each other, and you were just so reassuring, and you totally got it. And you used this phrase about, you know, you can't be in control of it, but you can sort of feel that you're not completely out of control. And I think there was the control element as well, which scared me a little bit. So I think that's the place that we sort of started from. But honestly, I think how far we've come from, I think we joined the program maybe when I was about 6 or 7 weeks pregnant. So it was really early. So we had a really amazing chunk of time to really sort of pour ourselves into it and learn as much as we could. And yeah, it was just learning more and more each week, really slowly started to sort of build up that confidence to the point where I felt totally ready to give birth, however it happened. And that's sort of how we ended up.
And I think the thing you said about the control and not feeling out of control was a big thing for you, certainly for both of us actually, that we are planners, like we like to know what's going to happen, and obviously that just isn't the case when you go into labour. you have no control really over what's going to happen. But what we learned really is that you've got control over how you can react and how you've prepared. And that made us feel much more calm in the moment. And I think so that I'm sure we'll touch on this later when we talk about kind of Kelly's birth story, but actually going into it feeling like that put a lot of those fears we had to one side a little bit before we went in.
Absolutely. I love that, Joe, because control is such a worry for so many families, because we kind of do live in a world now where the vast majority of us really thrive, especially women, I think, actually really thrive in feeling very in control. And we're quite used to having plans and mapping things out and knowing exactly what our strategy is going to be. And so birth can throw that real kind of curveball. So I love that idea of let's control the controllable. So let's know that we've done all the things that we can. And there are so many things, aren't there, like to influence how things might go. But equally, let's know what we're going to do when there's all those twists or turns. And one of the conversations we so often have, don't we, is like, what are the things that you really don't want to happen? And let's make more detailed plans for those. Because they are, like you say, there's this polarizing idea of birth in that either it's completely unmedicated or it's a complete, like, you know, chaotic emergency. And actually the vast majority of births land in that middle bit. And it's like, so how do we navigate that middle bit? Because that type of birth that perhaps everybody in an ideal world wants, that really straightforward, completely unmedicated physiological scenario, counts for about 4% of birth. So if we only think about that, what on earth are the other 96% doing? You know, that's that grey area is that empowerment. And I know that your birth was in that grey area, right? And you were empowered by it, which is one of those messages that we just want to shout from the rooftops, don't we? We just want to shout from the rooftops that it can be like that.
Definitely, yeah.
Talk us through the moment that you guys realized your birth experience was going to be positive and empowering for you. What was that shift? I know, like Kelly, you just mentioned that you then felt really excited and really prepared going into it, no matter what it might have looked like. How did that shift come about? What was that moment? Because like you say, initially you felt like you always had that fear of birth, and then got to this place where actually you were excited and ready.
Yeah, I think so I think there was just a gradual build up that I probably wasn't even noticing week by week, of just absorbing the information in manageable amounts at the right time. So, you know, what's amazing about what you do is you take a lot of really complicated topics and you explain them so clearly, and also you just distill, you know, what we need to know from the noise. There's so much noise out there. Really focusing on what is evidence-based, and that really helped as a sort of slow burn over the course of my pregnancy. But I think the real moment that we noticed was, just as you said, there was a session we had on preparing for the birth that you don't want, and that was just so eye-opening. So we wrote down the birth that we didn't want at the start, and I think it went something along the lines of, you know, I might have to be induced or have to have an oxytocin drip. It might result in forceps, and it might result in emergency C-section. As a slight spoiler alert, that is pretty much the birth that we ended up having, but it was completely positive, and we felt so calm and in control at every step of the way. So it really goes to show that if just by thinking through those scenarios is so important to engage with all the different things that could happen. As you said, obviously you can't, you know, completely plan for every eventuality and say, you know, if this happens, we're going to do this and this and this and this. But if you don't think about it at all beforehand, you're going to be encountering those things for the first time in the moment when you're at your most vulnerable. You can't really think clearly. So the fact that we'd already thought through all of that beforehand, I think really was the moment we felt quite calm about it.
You say that you can't plan for every eventuality. I mean, literally on this document which we wrote, we had like, what happens if we have to give birth on the side of the M4 on the way to the hospital? So we had like a flannel and a thermos packed just in case you needed to do a warm compress on the side of the road. I mean, you can't plan for every eventuality. But I think the point was that
you're pretty close.
Because we planned for so many eventualities, it meant we could feel relaxed that kind of we couldn't have done any more. And I think when it came to, and again you'll talk about this I'm sure in a minute, but when it came to actually giving birth as well, we tried everything we could and that you wanted to before we ended up in theatre. And so that, again, leaving no stone unturned and really feeling like you've given everything the best go and the best preparation you possibly could made us feel much more relaxed, comfortable, happy. And I think that's, again, what led to kind of the positive feeling that we had by the time Lola arrived.
This episode is sponsored by Apta Club. If you're pregnant or navigating life with a new baby, you'll know just how much information is out there and how difficult it can be to know what is evidence-based. That's why I wanted to tell you about Apta Club. They have a wide range of free educational resources and blogs covering pregnancy, birth, recovery, and early parenting, all designed to help you feel more informed and confident as you make decisions for you and your family. Whether you're wondering what to expect during labour, exploring your birth options, or preparing for those first few weeks with you and your little baby, having trusted, evidence-based information can make all the difference. And one feature I think many parents will find particularly helpful is the Apta Club Care Line, the opportunity to speak with regulated midwives and nutritionists who can provide general information and support when questions come up along the way. Every family's journey is unique, and it's important that you have access to balanced, evidence-based information to make informed decisions that are right for you and your family. For now, back to today's episode.
Yeah, and I think it's just that thing. It was almost by just thinking through, and like this didn't take long. You know, wouldn't want people to think that we were sat there for hours and hours preparing this document and thinking almost obsessively about what could happen. It was more that it was just a sort of mental dress rehearsal for the event, and it kind of meant that when we were then in it, we knew what questions to ask about, what are the alternatives, what else could we do, can we wait and see at this point. We never felt rushed because I think we'd done that preparation with you and the team about how to approach those kind of conversations. So that was a real eye-opening moment, I think, when we wrote down those different scenarios and how we'd want our environment to feel and what we'd want, what I want Joe to do at that point, potentially, although obviously that can change during labour. And we wrote these things out, and I didn't feel a shred of alarm or fear. It felt really matter of fact, like, okay, this is what we'll do, but we'll be flexible in the moment. And it just felt really kind of calm and confident at that point, which was amazing.
Yeah, I don't think we made any decisions based on fear, which is something that sometimes I think if you don't know what something is, you're probably going to shy away from it just because you're worried about what could happen. But because we kind of knew what every eventuality was, having looked into it and having followed some of the content on YPJ, it just meant that we were always making an informed choice rather than just kind of guessing or shying away from something.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so right, actually, like what you've both explained in terms of that fear often comes from not having that knowledge and information. And actually, often as well, it's from external sources. So whether it's like the horror story birth that you saw online or friends or family's experiences. And actually, when we unpick what's behind that and actually empower families, like you say, you can then beautifully make an informed choice. And I know you gave us an alluding spoiler that your birth with Lola was an emergency or an unplanned cesarean birth, but actually it was really positive and empowering. And I think what's such a powerful take-home message from that is, as a midwife, I've supported so many families and I've heard from so many families. And the thing that dictates whether a birth is positive or not positive or traumatic is actually very rarely the mode of birth. Because we see loads of families that on paper had a very straightforward physiological birth, but in their eyes, that was a really traumatic experience. And then we can have families like you guys who had an unplanned cesarean section, which many might think, gosh, that sounds really traumatic. But actually, you're like, no, it was really positive. And we made really enormous decisions together that felt solid and informed and empowering. And so actually things that we might assume cause trauma or cause positive feelings and outcomes, that's not always the case. It often comes down to the way that you felt and the way you were able to navigate that experience, which is what I think like you guys just did so like amazingly well in terms of preparation, because like you said, you did a lot and you started early. You started in that first trimester, which I always advocate for. You know, pregnancy is our 9-month training period for what lies ahead. So you put the work in. It wasn't a happy accident that you had a positive birth. You really put the work in. But what do you think, reflecting back now, kind of shaped your experience the most? Was it around some of the education? Was it around your mindset, the physical preparation? What were your kind of like the leading things, the things that if you had another baby, you'd be like, we have to make sure we do X, Y, Z again?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's probably all of the things you mentioned. But I think for me, understanding what was happening physically in my body throughout each trimester and why it was happening and what purpose it was serving was really helpful. So you know, some of the things that you experience during pregnancy aren't exactly very nice, and obviously it varies from person to person and pregnancy to pregnancy. But understanding, you know, why I was incredibly nauseous and vomiting a lot, understanding why someone might have, you know, round ligament pain or pelvic girdle pain or whatever it is, serving that purpose to prepare your body for birth. All of that I found incredibly helpful. I also think just a lot of the mindset tools and sort of the way to approach decision making that you talk about a lot was incredibly helpful. So like the brain tool as a way of sort of assessing how to make decisions and what to do next, you know, weighing up always, you know, you don't have to sort of immediately say yes, okay, to whatever the medical team are suggesting and recommending. Obviously they are far and away the professionals, they know infinitely more than we do, but also it is our choice and we're involved in that decision. And so understanding the benefits, the risks, is there anything else we could do at this point? Can we just do nothing and wait and see? Which actually we ended up doing quite a lot with my labour and was really helpful for us. So I think that approach really helped. And I think also just working on my mindset and sort of I suppose my psychology with Laura from YPJ, and sort of trying to reframe this as a positive experience and knowing that it could be a positive experience. I think I just really believed everything that you were saying, and you always say about you can have an empowering experience, it can be positive, but you know, you need to do these things and put the work in, and it absolutely was the case.
I think the mindset is the biggest thing, and I think all the other stuff feeds into that. So you did a lot of physical prep work as well. For, I mean, you're very active, you're sporty, you like to do stuff, and you were very active throughout labour. You know, doing your workouts, going for runs, going and playing a bit of sport as well.
Oh, during pregnancy, I wasn't going for a run. Sorry, not during labour.
That was not. I mean, that would have been impressive.
Yeah, ultra marathon of labour.
Yeah. Oh, that's next year. No, during pregnancy, but because you were doing all those things, I think that what it's really doing, whilst it's preparing your body, it's like it's giving you that mindset of like, I'm doing this for a purpose, this is all positive. And I think that was really helpful. And then I just wanted to add from my side, because I don't think dads or partners generally often know what to do with themselves during labour, was a thing I wanted to say. And so in terms of preparing, I obviously, just like any other first time birth partner, wasn't really sure what I was going to do in there. But actually, just through being quite present and involved with all of the content through YPJ, I felt like I had quite a good understanding of what might happen during labour. And it meant that I could do things like ask questions to the doctors and try to be supportive, count through your contractions, all these little things that I just wouldn't have known to do, or that might have been helpful. And in the end, you said that those were some of the most helpful things I could have done. Now, I wouldn't have had a clue to do those without a bit of kind of learning and education beforehand. So, you know, these aren't huge things, but they're just I think by educating yourself and by understanding what's likely to happen on the day, or what things might be helpful from you, I think it probably made me a lot more useful than if I'd been sat in the corner looking a bit lost and confused, which I think at one point I did feel like might be the case. So that was really helpful.
I love that, Jo, because so often dads will say to me like, well, I'm going to advocate and I'm going to help and support. And then when we break that down, it's like, but what on earth is that? You know,
Yeah.
how do you advocate or ask questions for medical practitioners if you don't have any knowledge and understanding about what's going on? Because you don't really know, you know, we don't just want to be going, no, we're not doing that because it's not on the birth plan, because we know that's not helpful for anybody involved. So it's like actually being able to ask those appropriate questions can only happen with information. We can't advocate if we don't have that information and knowledge.
Yeah.
And then, like you say, those tools and techniques that you were proactive in supporting Kelly with that feel like small things, but actually completely change the game. Like sometimes the simple things are the most effective. And we know that a birth partner that can advocate and be present and support through labour really does improve birth outcomes enormously for mum and baby, but crucially as well protects dads against birth trauma, because you have a bird's eye view of everything going on in that room, don't you? Like as the birth partner, you see everything, and seeing that person that you love so much going through this experience, if you have no idea what to expect, can be hugely traumatic for dads and birth partners as well. So it's so important that you are involved and you are part of that. And clearly, Jo, you're continuing to be very involved, because what people listening can't see is that Jo has got their beautiful little 8-week girl all snuggled up in a little baby wrap cuddled into him. So it does, I think, being involved in pregnancy, being involved through that birth, being that active participant really impacts, you know, how you navigate fatherhood and that transition to postpartum as well, doesn't it?
Definitely. And I feel like, yes, I'm really happy that we did all of it together. It does make it feel much more, I mean, it was always going to be a joint enterprise, you know, but it makes it feel much more like we've done this as a team. And I think, yeah, it's made this first 8 weeks. I'm lucky that I've been able to take quite a bit of paternity leave. So I'm still off work at the moment, 8 weeks in, and I've still got a few more weeks to go. And it really feels like we can kind of support each other. And I think it was important that we started that way, even through pregnancy and through learning together. It's just made me be able to be so much more helpful. And I don't even like using the word helpful, because, you know, am I helping Kelly or is she helping me? It should be equal, I think. But it's just being able to parent equally as much as possible. And I think just through understanding and educating ourselves, we've been able to do that much better, which I'm really thankful for.
Oh, you guys are so amazing. Now, labour and birth. Let's go to that main event, the big day, Lola's arrival into the world. Before we get into this week's episode, there is something I've been waiting to tell you. I'm really excited to share that I am the resident midwife for the baby show in 2026. And I will be live at the baby show NEC Birmingham, sponsored by Pampers, from Friday, the 8th of May to Sunday, the 10th of May, the NEC Birmingham. I'll be on the live talk stage sponsored by Tommy Tippy and Boots Parenting Club on Saturday, the 9th of May at 3 p.m, sharing tools and techniques that you need to support you during labour and birth. The Baby Show is the UK's largest and best loved pregnancy, baby and parenting event, running since 2002, where visitors can buy, compare, try and save from over 350 brands, as well as gain invaluable expert advice all under one roof. They know a thing or two about babies. Tickets can be bought online at thebabyshow.co.uk/NEC, thebabyshow.co.uk/NEC. And if you pop the code PTPIPPOD, that is PTPIP pod POD, before Thursday the 7th of May at midnight, you will be able to save over 25% off your on-door tickets. So please get yourself a ticket and come and say hi. I would love to meet you. And now, back to the episode. You navigated lots of challenges, didn't you guys? You navigated twists and turns. How did you handle that? How did you kind of walk yourselves through some of those perhaps more unexpected challenges during labour? How was that birth experience for you?
Yeah, the birth experience was overall really positive. But do you know, we were thinking about this beforehand, and definitely positive, definitely different emotions at different points. But I think one of the positive things for me about it was actually that I look back on it now and it felt fairly what's the word I'm trying to use? It felt fairly just
routine, yeah.
As in it was just so calm, and felt like we knew what we were doing at every step of the way. Even when it kind of resulted in the consultant sort of saying category 1 C-section, even at that point, I think maybe you were I was probably too tired and drugged up at that point.
I was going to say, yeah, I think I was a little bit more worried at that stage.
A bit more worried at that stage.
Yeah, when they said her heart rate's just a little bit low, we'd like to get her out now. But yeah, the first thing actually, which I think was a little bit of a kind of an unexpected challenge. So Kelly's waters broke in the middle of the night, about 1 o'clock in the morning, on a Saturday night, Sunday morning. We headed to the hospital, and obviously we knew from having done some of the content, we thought, well, water's breaking, that doesn't necessarily mean we'll stay in hospital, it probably means they want to check us over. So we called up the midwife line, went in, fully expecting to come home. In fact, we did put the hospital bags in because we thought, just in case, but we were fully expecting to be back home and back in our beds in an hour and a half's time. Got there, went up to the midwife-led unit where we'd planned originally to have the baby. And they had a quick look, and they said that Lola had done some meconium in the waters. So there's a little poo in the waters, which increases infection risk, which means that they like to get the baby out within 24 hours, which is what we were told. And so they said, look, you're not going home. You're going to go down to labour ward, and the baby's going to go home with you when you leave the hospital. So straight away, that could have thrown us a little bit. But I think, like Kelly said, it felt quite calm. I mean, part of that is obviously the midwives were fantastically professional and calm and great anyway. But I think also because we knew that this was a possibility, and also that this didn't necessarily mean there was a problem, it was just a slight increased risk, that everything was okay, but it just meant that we were going to have a baby within the next day or so. So it's very exciting, but also a bit of a different challenge.
And I think it was that thing where you do the preparation, you think through the scenarios, but you always need to remember we have to be flexible. So I think if I'd have been too wedded to being in the birth centre, which was far and away my preference, I think I would have been really disappointed at that point, and we might have started to go down a bit more of a negative mindset route there and then. But because we'd always borne in mind, everything is on the table, anything could happen, moving to the labour ward was, that's fine, we're just going down a slightly different track, we'll see sort of how that progresses. So that was the poo in the waters was definitely a little curveball from Lola, but was just kick-started things off in a different way.
and then throughout the next sort of 20 to 24 hours, it was like consistent monitoring, just because of the infection risk, and also you were put on an oxytocin drip just to augment things, to try and speed things along, to make sure she came out within that sort of 24-hour ticking clock. And the first sort of 8 hours were kind of okay, and the contractions were getting stronger, and every 4 hours they would kind of re-examine you, and after, I think it was after 8 hours, they first said, look, to be honest, at this point it would be reasonable to go for a C-section, because things are progressing, but they're going quite slowly, but it's up to you. We could leave it another few hours, we could kind of give you an epidural and up the oxytocin drip and do all these things, and because we kind of knew what each of those things meant, and that Kelly was quite keen to try everything possible to have a physiological vaginal birth, I think it was really helpful that we knew that we could wait and see. So we did that, and that happened for another couple of cycles, and eventually we got to sort of 22 hours I think, after your waters broke, and you were 10 centimeters dilated. And they said, okay, well, let's try some pushes. But Lola's head wasn't quite in the right place, so they said, okay, we're probably going to have to try to use forceps to get her out. Is that okay? So again, we knew what forceps were, we kind of knew what this meant. And
and I think again that could have been another moment where I think probably a lot of women hear forceps and think like, that's not what I want. And I was definitely that way, again, until I learned more about it with you and talking to people in the community about it, and because they'd said it at that moment, I sort of knew as well that they were going to ask to consent me for a C-section. So it was funny, my mindset was definitely not, oh my goodness, forceps. It was, right, we're going to get this baby out with the forceps so we can avoid the C-section. It was just, let's focus, we're definitely going to get her out. But as is so often the case, she had other ideas, and she just shifted a little bit again, and they said, actually, no, we can't get her out with forceps. Her heart rate's dropping, so C-section.
And it was, I mean, we were in theatre when they said that,
Yeah.
and it was, I think we timed it was like 6 minutes later after they'd said category 1 C-section, she was screaming at us.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was, honestly, it was so quick, but very calm. You know,
So calm.
they obviously know what they're doing. They do it hundreds of times a week, I guess. But it was honestly amazing. I mean, it went kind of from your waters breaking to having a baby within about 26 hours, and it just flew by. It was absolutely incredible. And like you say, I don't think there was any point where we didn't feel quite calm and positive about it all. Maybe the 5 minutes between them saying category 1 emergency C-section and Lola coming out, I was a little bit wobbly. But other than that, I think we were basically fine.
But even then, like you know, they said we could play music, which we did. So we put on some music that I played a lot when I was pregnant with
she
her.
obviously likes it, because we can hear her speaking to the music. That was a thumbs up.
Honestly, so you can still make that environment, you know, a way that feels comfortable to you, which was really lovely, and actually meant that, you know, it was so happy when they sort of did the Lion King moment with her over the sheets, and she was screaming, and it was it was great. So
my brand new book, Midwife Pip's Guide to a Positive Birth, is now available. So much more than a book, this is a guide that allows me to hold your hand through your birth preparation journey. With over a decade of experience and knowledge packed in to ensure you really are empowered in the way you deserve to achieve a positive birth, regardless of the twists and turns that crop up. Make sure that you get your hands on Midwife Pip's Guide to a Positive Birth book now and are empowered to have the birth experience that you deserve.
please.
I love that. And what I think is just so powerful, and the reason that I'm so grateful that you guys are sharing your story, is if we took you back to when I first met you, 6-week first time parents, Kelly and Joe, and someone had said to you then, when your baby comes, they're going to come by a category 1 cesarean section after, unsuccessful forceps and meconium stained, waters in labor. And like at that point, you probably, how would you have felt if that had been told to you at that like initial
it's funny you say that, because we did some antenatal classes as well, which were really helpful for meeting some other couples, and great to meet them in the local area and all that sort of thing. We have other couple friends now who had relatively similar birth experiences to ours, maybe not exactly the same. But it's like you said, the difference in experience, despite what actually happened on paper, the difference in experience is massive. And I think, as you just say, we would not have necessarily coped with all of that happening very well if we hadn't known how to cope with it. And I think what we've seen with a few of our friends is maybe they haven't found it as easy, maybe even for births that were maybe more straightforward on paper. So I think that's a really big thing for us, that we feel like, despite the fact it was kind of the textbook birth that we said you didn't want, it actually ended up being a really positive experience.
And I think if you had said this is how your birth is going to be to me at the beginning, I would have run a mile. I would have just no thank you.
Changed my mind, actually.
Return policy, please. But now I think I would have that exact birth experience again, for sure, because it was there was no point at which we had any regrets, or had left nothing on the table. Like, as Joe was saying, it was really important for me to try and deliver vaginally, so I feel like we gave that the best shot. And it was just, she was born how she was born, and that's kind of, that was always how it was meant to be, I think, really.
I love that. And I think, like going back to that, what it looks like on paper versus how it feels. And I think so often when we think about birth prep or planning a birth, the end goal is what it looks like on paper. And actually, I always really encourage families to think about reframing that. What we want to achieve shouldn't be a straightforward vaginal birth. It should be a birth that feels positive and empowering. And there are clearly, as you guys experienced a lot of, 1,001 nuances within that. But that doesn't have to be the thing, because, like you say, there are so many things without it, out of your control. So if that is our thing that we're pinning all of our hopes of a positive birth on, we are so at risk of having a birth experience that we do feel regretful of. And I know you mentioned, Kelly, that perhaps your mum had a difficult experience, so whether subconsciously some of your fear around birth had potentially been passed on, accidentally through, just conversations around birth. When someone's had a negative birth, you feel that shift in energy, don't you? And the kind of way it's spoken about. And the massive power, I think, of our generation and what you have created a shift in yourselves is the way that we now talk about birth to our children. So had you have had that birth and it had been traumatic, and then as Lola grows up and we still then have that, unintentional shadow around birth when she starts talking about it as she gets older, compared to now, when actually you talk to her about her birth in a really positive light and what you went through and how strong you were as a couple, how empowering making those choices were for you as a woman, Kelly, and understanding your body as a female. And you then get to pass that kind of highlight of birth down to Lola versus passing down more generational birth trauma is such a powerful shift that you literally took in your hands as parents and, brought her into the world, allowing you to have that paradox around birth as a family, which I just think is massive credit to you as parents, because it's not easy to do, is it? It can be so much easier to kind of bury your head and maybe hope for the best, but you guys were like, no, we're taking the reins and we're changing this trajectory.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's so true. And I also think like the flip side is true as well. Like people who kind of almost brush off their birth. So we've had that as well, where people will sort of be like, oh, it's so easy, mine, I coughed and you came out, and it's just, I don't know why you're so worried. And that I feel kind of minimizes, as you say, like the depth of the experience. And there will be twists and turns, but you do really learn how strong you can be mentally and physically, and how much preparation really counts. Because I kind of, again, not to minimize it myself, but I sort of think about it a bit like being, if you're preparing for a race. So I'm a runner, and like you wouldn't just go into a race thinking, oh, I'll just toddle off to the start line and I'm sure it'll be fine. You do all this preparation, physically and mentally, and nutrition as well, which is super important for labour.
Yeah.
And you just sort of, if you have that preparation, take it really seriously. But it is also that kind of think about the emotional side of it as well, and how you'll be feeling. And it's it's a really big event, so it sort of deserves the thought and attention, to take it seriously.
And there's lots of things you can't control, to extend the analogy. If the weather's bad, or if you hurt yourself early on, or whatever it is, you've got to find a way of getting through it, and just kind of the resilience that you build by educating yourself and training for it. I think that's it's quite a good analogy.
Definitely, 100%, totally agree. And the idea of that positive birth, what would you say now, if you had, you were speaking to someone who's expecting first baby, second baby, what would you say defines a positive birth experience, having had the experience that you guys have?
I think it is, I think it's having no regrets. So knowing that you asked all the questions. So I think it's the fact that I don't look back on it and think, oh, I wonder if I should have just asked them this at this point, or if we should have tried this. Knowing that we sort of were really comfortable with the decision. We might not have actually asked all the right questions in the moment, but knowing that we felt comfortable with the option that was presented to us, and we, as you said, we weren't making any of those decisions out of fear. Because I think, again, something that you said that really stuck with me is that you've always got time in labour and birth. There's so few circumstances where actually, we need to move ASAP, and there's no time. It's really incredibly rare. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, though. Actually,
I mean, you had a category 1 cesarean birth, Kelly, which is the most imminent need for birth, and you still had time. So absolutely.
We got the phone out, we put music on, and it was still it was all good. So I think knowing that you've got time, so if you're in any doubt about something that a part of the medical team is saying to you or recommending, absolutely ask the questions until you feel confident knowing what's about to happen and why it's about to happen. I think that is the real thing for me for a positive And then a second thing, like having a solid birth partner, like is just essential. Like I don't think it would have been the same without you being as informed as you were and knowing what to do at different points. And you say counting through the contractions was a small thing, but at certain points it was the only thing that I could focus on, and it was great, and it really got us through. And there were also points where I think I maybe took on a little bit too much gas and air, and was was slightly out of it. So I was like, I just need to focus on Joe's face, and then I know it'll be okay. So there was, your real sort of anchor in the moment. So yeah, those are the two things I think, like knowing that you're confident with what's happening and feel comfortable with it, and having a birth partner who really knows their stuff.
It sounded like you could really trust in Joe. Like he really was your anchor of like, actually, I know I'm feeling a bit, whatever, but I know if I focus on him, I know what he knows. I know he's got it and he'll get me through.
And I think that's it. I felt like I could actually be helpful because I felt like I did know enough to be helpful. So just, I guess, from my side, educating yourself to the point where you kind of know how to ask the right questions and know what little things or bigger things you can do to try to help the person who's in labour. Because there is lots you can do, even if you might not really realise it or might not feel like a huge amount. I think, that's something that Kelly has said a few times to me, that actually even the little things feel like bigger things in that moment.
Absolutely. And I love that you guys use the counting technique, because I made that up in my second labour.
Nice.
It's
It was really intense. It was a really intense labour, and I just made it up. And my husband, who wasn't prepped in the counting technique because it didn't exist, managed to somehow get what I was trying to get him to do quite quickly, actually. I was like, start counting. And then he must have clocked what I was doing when he was counting. And it was like, okay. But that was like genuinely the most powerful form of pain relief for me in my second birth. Like, it was phenomenal, and I know so many families find the same. Having that active focus technique is a real game changer. So I always love it. And people are like, the counting helps us too.
Absolutely,
really good.
And looking back now, if you could give advice to, we have lots of expectant parents listening to the podcast, what advice would you want to offer them, having gone through your experience? Maybe Kelly, if you hit us up with some mum to mum, and Joe come for some dad to dad, would be awesome. But what would you want them to take home and to hear? What do you wish someone had maybe told you?
I think don't bury your head in the sand, which is what I did for a very, very long time, and then had to work quite hard to undo. But it's absolutely possible. So I think if you're feeling worried, absolutely the way to overcome that is to engage with it fully and throw yourself into it. And I'd really recommend, I haven't been paid to say this, but I'd 100% recommend Pip's book, which is incredible and can help. Because I think part of the problem with why burying your head in the sand might be quite appealing is because there's so much information out there, and it can be really difficult to know, okay, fine, I want to inform myself and be empowered, but where on earth do I start? And I think your book just kind of takes you through every step of the way in a really, really helpful way. So I think that would be the main thing for me. And just as a little aside, what I also loved is that we squeak from Lola there. She wants to get involved. We have quite a few photos from labour and birth, and I'd be like, absolutely take photos, ask the midwives to take photos. It's been lovely looking back at them. Some of the ones of me in labour, I sort of appreciate them in terms of, wow, I didn't do that, but I don't immediately love them just yet. But the ones of the first minutes where she'd been born are just incredible. They're incredibly special. And again, that's in a sterile theatre environment, so you absolutely can have that, and it's really lovely. So I don't know what you would.
I love the photos in labour. Such a good one, actually, Kelly, because sometimes as well, particularly if labour has been tiring or it's been overnight or it's been quite long, you can kind of have blank spaces of kind of what happened, and so it can almost be like that timeline. And like you say, even if no one else ever sees them, they're just really private and personal, but actually give you those bits of information and to remind yourself. Like, I know I said that, I'm sure I said it to you, Kelly, I said it to most of our families, when you have a positive birth, just write down somewhere how you feel about yourself, because there are so many trials and tribulations that follow naturally just in the course of life, even parenthood aside, and actually being able to reflect back on, look how strong and capable I am, look what barriers I overcame in, you know, the most precious moment, and just giving yourself that like little reminder of how amazing you are. You know, that creating that from birth is something that you then get to keep and to transfer into all those other aspects of life. And I think, yeah, those pictures are that like reminder, aren't they, of like, gosh, look what I did, like look how amazing that was. I love that.
Okay, well, I just think I've been thinking in the last couple of minutes what I can say that I haven't already said. I think one thing that I didn't do very well, and that I would advise people to do a little bit better than me, is just think about looking after yourself a bit more as a birth partner. So I didn't really eat or sleep for about 48 hours between Kelly's waters breaking on. I'd say 48 hours. I'm thinking about it now. It was probably longer than that. I think I maybe slept 3 hours and 60. We worked out or something. Because the whole time, obviously, you want to be there, you want to be supportive, you want to be helpful, you want to do everything. But actually, I think it made me into a bit of a zombie by the end of it all. And I probably shouldn't admit this, but when at 11 o'clock at night on the first night when I was kicked out of the hospital and told I had to go home because I couldn't stay overnight on the postnatal ward, actually going home and having 6 hours of sleep was amazing. And I kind of, in hindsight, if I'd just probably eaten a little bit better, drank a little bit more, and slept a little bit in that sort of first day, because one thing I didn't realise, I suppose I realised through YPJ, was that there was a point actually where Kelly decided to have an epidural when she was on quite a strong oxytocin drip. And she slept for a couple of hours, so she was obviously exhausted and she was contracting everything, but she was getting some rest. And I kind of felt, well, I've got to stay awake through all of this. What if a doctor comes in? And the truth is, I probably should have actually just tried to get a little bit of sleep then as well, because I think that would have put me in a better position to be more supportive. I think I was still able to do lots of stuff, but I think there was probably more I would have felt capable of doing if I'd been a bit better rested. So I think just making sure that you know that labour can go on for a really long time. There's a lot of adrenaline, which is great. That'll keep you up for a long time. But when it kind of starts to dissipate, you will crash pretty quickly. So making sure you eat and sleep yourself, as difficult as it might be to do it, I think that's something which is important, not only for yourself, but to support your partner and your new baby, obviously.
Yeah, it's such a good point, Joe. We're so focused, aren't we, in labour of like, get the baby here, that we forget that afterwards there's this whole marathon. Like, it doesn't stop. Like, you still have to be awake. And I think sometimes, like you say, you were like, Kelly is asleep, but I feel like I should stay awake. Sometimes communicating that, because sometimes as a dad, you feel like, gosh, if I'm asleep, they're going to think, oh, he's asleep in the corner. She's the one doing all the work. But actually, if you communicate like, look, just because Kelly's having a sleep at the moment, I'm going to have a sleep. But if you need anything, if she needs anything, please wake me up. I'm just conscious that I want to be, helpful when the baby comes. So, I'm not being useless in the corner. I'm not bored or fed up. I'm just like being practical and thinking ahead. And even if it's like little 10-minute bursts of sleep, actually, that's better than nothing. It's like recharging your phone for 10 minutes versus just letting the battery run out. Those little moments are really helpful. But yeah, that's such a good point, isn't it? That like almost pressure and like societal expectations on expectant parents and new parents is enormous. And I think that's probably one of those examples of where that can fit in for dads in the birth room.
Yes, definitely.
Guys, you're awesome. You're absolutely awesome. I know me and the whole team are like just absolutely love supporting you in the family. And little Lola, who is just, oh my goodness. And like Joe is currently the best advert for baby wearing ever.
She slept for this whole podcast. Honestly, she was screaming before, so it must be you, Pip. Yeah. She's calmed right down. So yeah.
Like, is this voice again? Oh, guys, honestly, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your story with us, because like I say, it's such a powerful message, isn't it? And I think for anyone listening, your big take home is that positive birth is not what it looks like on paper. It's how it feels to you. And I promise you that is something that is within your control. With the right support, the right information, and the right preparation, you can take the reins on that experience. If you have listened to this birth story, enjoyed it, and feel that you are ready to really embrace and dedicate yourself to having the most informed, supported, and empowered journey, and want to see if we may be able to support you in YPJ, your pregnancy and postnatal journey, please drop me a Instagram DM at midwife_pip or get in touch on my email, pip@midwifepip.com, and let's chat through things and see if we might be a good match for each other. I hope you've enjoyed listening and wishing you all the best on your journey through pregnancy, birth, and beyond.